Zahvaljujem se, dobar dan, dobro jutro, dobar dan. Naravno, moje izlaganje bi trebalo biti na engleskom jeziku, iako sam mogao spremiti i na srpskom, ali eto, to je to, susret kultura, pa moramo malo da verglamo i na ostalim jezicima. Ladies and gentlemen, dear guests and participants of this conference, at the beginning, also my colleagues, dear friends in science, first of all, at the beginning, I would like to express my gratitude to the organizer for inviting me and giving me that honor to deliver today's plenary lecture on the subject of the concept of universal ethics as a new general moral reality and the base for the people's culture today. So the new modern way of life of mankind is fulfilled with a variety of new phenomena and new ethical values. So some of them usually are old but constantly very active values like honesty, love and friendship. Some are old but reaffirmed values that people today find it necessary to highlight and follow more than in the past period, such as respect for the close one, compassion and understanding of the others. Some are very new values, and actually it is hard to something to show up as a completely new in the world, something that the new mind has never imagined, but it is possible to bring up something that was up till now not very important for the humanity, and it is now necessary to be a leading element of the spiritual living and behavior. Among all the new ethical phenomena and values, the most authentic idea is, of course, the creation of universal ethics as a project of UNESCO. Universal ethics is really a new phenomena in humanity. When 300 years ago, for example, the empiristic ethics was born, one of the arguments was for the role of the experience in building ethical attitudes that were the different ethical values of people who then began to describe world travelers and anthropologists. Nowadays, it is exactly the empiristic ethical concept that represents a base of a founding unique human ethics worldwide based on the different ethical views which depend on different life experiences and moral practices and ethical visions. So universal ethics is a new phenomenon manifested similar to the new activities of the modern humanity like informational society and politics, in which citizens are being asked for every important question, quartal activities as an activity without direct material goals and benefits, also the opening of the cosmos and cosmism as a view for the unity of all phenomena in the universe, also the bioethics and the environmental ethics as a reflection of concerns about the injuries of the nature and the pollution in the environment, and the global political communities in the forms of United Nations. In another words, universal ethics is the same phenomenon under global importance as is the globalization of economy, for example, the general communications on social fields, and the associate political policy. All these phenomena were preparing the universal ethics, especially the adoption of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights as the most ethical and political document of the new humanity, influenced its occurrence in particular. Many activities of UNESCO contribute to this, such as the first unified world history of civilization, for example, stressing that all human beings are equal and comparing their lives, for example, works and ethics, in which there are many differences, but also identical intentions and equal valuable achievements. The vision for universal ethics naturally aroused, and the need for its constitution emphasized, and the humanity was called for a creation of it, and still is trying to do so. So universal ethics itself is an ethical value because the construction of one of the most important ethical duties today. It is a particularly ethical activity which emphasized the value of ethics for human life and which established an uniform system of ethical views which would be and should be accepted and followed by all people of the world. Universal ethics consists of two things. The first one is the ethical system of the values and norms itself, which would include norms and values that are most important for all humanity, respected by all people. The second is that in the universal ethics there is an expression of ethical thinking and determination of all people, so that is why different goals and attitude penetrates in it. In other words, different ethical experiences such as heritage of mankind are being shared in it. As such, universal ethics is an ethical construction. By goodwill, people hope that there will be a successful piece of work, that it will would be accepted and loved by everyone. So, however, its idea is not only idealistic but quite realistic. It is so because at the core of its concept, it is the vision of a unique world which is not yet a reality, but it is something that builds and it's closer to the reality day by day. So the universal ethics is a construction of existing ethical values. It is made up of ideas and ethical norms that are already created in mankind. So it contains the most valuable ethical values and norms of all ages, from all the nations and the best thinkers of humanity. It contains the actual values and norms. Its visionaries think that people will accept the best values and norms of other nations as they have been accepted and build their own good ethical values. In other words, the construction of universal ethics actually means putting in mutual contact the valuable ethical ideas of all people and their overall unifying. Universal ethics is not virtual one, but it is an acting ethics, and that is why it represents a value of construction. The values in it are not arranged one beside the other as a display of ethical desires and opportunities, but they are placed in a hierarchical scale as a call for implementation. Values cannot be arranged, but the most valuable ones point out themselves and then place themselves on the top of the ethical scale, further followed by others, and so on, until the completing of the ethical whole of the new humanity as a living and real world. A characteristic, one of the characteristics of the universal ethics is that advocates for positive attitude toward life, defending life and the right of good living for all. Thus, it is a kind of optimistic ethics that believes that it is possible to find a solution for different problems in life as well as for the human relationships. According to it, people should hope for good, to make good and to strive for the good, to become present in the whole human existence, to become a general symbol for it. At the top of the universal ethics, there is the value of peace. It is, with it comes the value of tolerance, solidarity, and cooperation. They are the most important new values of the whole humankind, which allows it to survive, to exist as a whole, and to develop in a positive direction. These values do not have a negative, but on the contrary, a positive form. For example, namely, very often peace is defined as a state of non-war, as a condition in which the hostility does not dominate. But the universal ethics considers the peace as a result of a goodwill and intentions, as an expression of the friendship and of the desire for peaceful living and creation. The aspiration of the universal ethics is for life to be a work of benevolent behavior, which naturally results in the state of peace. The same applies for the values of tolerance, solidarity, and cooperation. They do not mean non-attacking, non-retraction of assistance or help, or non-rejection of relations and affairs. They are a creative and active contribution to the value of peace. In other words, a manner in which people who desire peace treat each other, tolerate and accept the different ideas and different life forms, being always ready to help each other and act together in the work, the economy, the politics, and so on, the other important social areas. This logic of positive value form can be best understood if one is to analyze the value of ahimsa. For example, ahimsa is an integral part of the idea of peace and as the highest value. The Indian value ahimsa means non-violence, patience, tolerance for one another and not offending the others. However, it stands for good positive behavior, for love and respect for each other, for building good relationships, for helping. One of its expressions is the most famous modern ethical saying, help ever, hurt never. As such, the value ahimsa is a structural part of the value peace as a supreme universal value with an active dimension. The basis lies in the restraining from violence. So in this vision, the value peace is conceived an activist behavior which is to build peace by and with all means, among which are included the psychological stability and pure intention of each and everyone. For these reasons, the bases are not the classical value of self-control, for example, moderation also, or perhaps rationality, which are the standard important human values, but the human appeal or shift toward the values of giving and love for the loved ones, and more substantial for the new understanding of the ethics and for the new united world. From the supreme value of peace follow the remaining values of universal ethical scale, intoned by the values of peace, tolerance, solidarity and cooperation. They are expressing the logic of one world that is aware of the joint existence and of the necessity of peaceful human behavior for the further survival of the humankind and life itself on the earth. For these reasons, high up on the scale are the values of self-respect and dignity, the values of working and of providing assistance or help, of understanding himself and others, as well as the problems and causes of conflicts for which a resolution can be found using peaceful means and agreement. Universal ethics indicates that our best interest will be achieved by having a good relationship with everyone and through forgiveness in a new cultural manners and matrix. Anyone can contribute toward the building or the establishment of the values of universal ethics because of the fact that all the nations of the world have good ethics and do understand the issues of peace and cooperation, of working and building or creating, of suffering and also helping. The universal ethics outlines these dimensions of living and of the ethical awareness and neglects the supporting of misunderstanding and conflict among people. That is why it incorporates all ethical ideas of all eras and of all nations that lead to peace and goodwill among people, as well as the ideas and the messages of all ethical philosophers who taught people to guide their personal interest in correlation with the good wishes for the others and to achieve success on the basis of the cooperation between the people and not through confrontation, thus avoiding violence and robbery. In Macedonia, we also contribute to building the universal ethics, not only by supporting generally the idea of such ethical system, but also with the good ethical ideas of our current living and our past. We are, as you know, a particular community of Macedonians, Albanians, Turks, Vlachs, Serbs, Bulgarians, Roma, Jewish, Armenians, Greeks, and all other nations. And in our mutual life, the main idea was never confronting among people, but the vision of common existence and cooperation, tolerance and health. Our community has never endured pogroms, large internal conflicts, and there is no massive hate and collective envy. Only in political meaning. Our peaceful world is at the same time a community of peaceful, hardworking, modest people focused at the struggle for survival, in which people earn a living, not through fighting, conflict and robberies, but through an honest day of work in an environment of mutual tolerance and respect. We understand the idea of universal ethics, and we consider that such ethics is useful, especially when there are large differences among people and nations. On a small scale, we also have our general ethics, which include various moral experiences of the nations in our country, who express, of course, not only their different historical destiny, but also their identical joint past and present. So in such ethics as we have, the core is the values of the united and joint living, in which the man is respected accordingly to its behavior. Those values also include great closeness with the neighbors, very often more than with the distant relatives. So the foundation of the ethics also bears the values of craftsmanship moral, which expresses the common destiny of those who is practicing, the commitment to the work and to the success, respect for all, and hard working and honest in their work, and mutual support for everyone who works in the same system. This includes closeness with the family, in which people find refuge and peace and achieve the objectives of providing for life and building a future for their children. Beside these life values for the universal ethics, we also offer ethical insights and acknowledgements from our ancestors. The most famous moral philosopher of our past is Saint Clement from Ohrid, the first Macedonian bishop, a student of the Slavic educators Saints Kirill and Methodius, a founder of the first Slavic university in Ohrid, in Europe generally, teacher, speaker, agronomist and musician, of course. This universal individual is our first and most famous moral philosopher. In his papers and sermons, he emphasized the role of ethics in the quality of living, insists on good ethical behavior, and teaches people to live in peace and harmony, to reconcile and to have respect for themselves and for the others. He recommended a very interesting ethical objective. People should compete among themselves in doing good, thus outperforming themselves as limited and morally deficient beings. Among the many ethical messages of Saint Clement from Ohrid, the most famous and the most notable is the following sentence: "Stay away from the evil and do good." With this message, Saint Clement advised people that their goal should not be only not to do evil and to distance themselves from it, but also actively to do good as a source of the desired ethics. We propose to include this ethical message in the general basis of the finest values and norms of universal ethics. So in this context also, this message is a base of the ethical education of the youngest people in my country, and as a new form of their elevation and their preparation for life and autonomous moral persons, in order for them to face the big challenges for the future and successfully to deal with them along with other people from the region and the entire world. Saint Clement is respected by all nations of the Balkans. Also respected is his brother Saint Naum from Ohrid, founder of the first Slavic monastery, a first Balkan bioethician, also a well-known teacher and medical practitioner. He was and still is respected by Christians and Muslims, and on his day in the monastery located near the springs of the Ohrid Lake, Macedonians, Turks and Albanians equally come to pay a kind of a tribute to the saint known from Ohrid. Such are the persons, to conclude, whose ideas should be incorporated in the universal ethics. They are made qualified due to their personal virtue and ethical self-awareness, thus devoting themselves to the construction of the proper moral standards for its people. Searching our more recent history, Macedonian recent history, we can single out the ethical idea of the leader of the Macedonian uprising movement, Goce Delchev, who was killed 110 years ago in 1903. So in the declaration of the uprising in 1903 was equally entitled to all the nations living in Macedonia. The ethical message of Goce Delchev contained the most modern idea of this epoch, indicating that the competition among the nations should be in the field of culture, in creation and building, not in hate, hostility and feral competition. These ethical ideas of ours should take a humble spot at the universal hierarchical scale. However, they belong to the universal ethics, and there they will be found according to their importance and according to the serious and sympathetic ethical approach of their enunciators. As such, the universal ethics begin to find its way to our hearts and lives, just as with the basic positive thoughts and norms of living of all the nations of the world, it began to implant in their life ethics in the overall of the new moral practice of all people that can be found in the cultural models of behavior. Therefore, the universal ethics becomes a new general moral reality, a base of the culture of the people and of the recent history of the mankind, which will enable a new rise of the human civilization. That's why an encounter of the cultures is so important as an issue nowadays. Thank you.